Money FM 89.3, the best of the afternoon update. The Afternoon Update with Lynlee Foo.
Money FM 89.3, I'm Lynlee and welcome to Industry Insight. From your neighborhood cafe to beauty salons and tuition centers, Singapore's SMEs are the backbone of the economy, employing nearly 70% of the workforce and contributing close to half of the GDP. But even as consumers go almost entirely cashless, with e-payments more than doubling to 1.25 trillion Sing dollars in 2023, and over 90% of adults registered for PayNow, many SMEs are still struggling to fully digitize. So what will it take to close this gap? Why is Singapore becoming such a critical hub for PayTech innovation? And how are new partnerships and cross-border expansion reshaping the competitive landscape across the region? Joining me today to unpack all that is Christopher Yu, president of KPay, a fast-growing PayTech company that's just announced plans to establish its regional headquarters right here in Singapore. Christopher, a very warm welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Now, let's begin with talking about SMEs, of course. Now, they are often called the backbone of Singapore's economy, but digital adoption among them still seems uneven, especially in sectors like F&B, retail, and beauty. So from KPay's perspective, what's holding these SMEs back from going fully digital?
I think we see a few things. I would kind of break it down into 3 points. One is we see a lot of people are still, SMEs in particular, stifled by complexity. Second is stifled by choice. And a lot of times they lack the support in helping them make a decision. So ultimately, I think from our perspective at KPay, we're trying to solve for these 3 pain points: complexity, choice, and support. So on the complexity side, of course, we started with payment as our book product 4 years ago when we entered the market. So payment, it has to be a simple and intuitive tool, which requires limited training and provides simple dashboards, real-time insights for a merchant as they operate their business. So that's a baseline for us. And then the second and third point around choice and support, I see it as one. A lot of people are ultimately stifled by choice. And again, they feel like they have a limited support in helping them make a decision. So for us, we've built specialized teams to help merchants as they start, operate, and grow their business. Mm-hmm. For example, we have a 24/7 multilingual live support. We have merchant success team as well as solution consultants to really personalize the assistance and really help merchants journey with them and handhold them along this whole digitalization process.
Well, it sounds like it's less about them being willing to do it, but more about how accessible these solutions are to them and how, they make sense to them on the ground.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's important to understand that for us as a B2B business, we feel like the product, which is, payments and everything that we're doing on the SaaS and other side, needs to be educated and sold to the merchant. Whereas a lot of people think that unlike a B2C business where the product can be bought, so the whole user journey, user experience is quite different.
Okay, talking about that, on the consumer side though, things look very different. MAS reported that e-payments in Singapore more than doubled to $1.25 trillion last year, and over 90% of adults are now registered for PayNow. Clearly, consumers are ready. But are SMEs keeping up with these expectations?
Yeah, just to add one more statistic to that. So what we've seen is actually about 94% of SMEs have actually adopted e-payments in 2023. So that's up from actually 74%.
Wow.
So even amongst that 5-year gap, we've actually seen quite a bit of SME adoption. So I guess ultimately the question is, okay, if over 90% of the population are using payment tools and SME side, actually 94% plus is actually adopting it, why do we still feel like there's a gap, right? So I think the question to really ask is, having the tool versus actually using the tool and enabling really the operational side of the business, I think it's two different things. So I feel like for Singapore, we're already at that adoption phase. So the second phase that we're moving into is the enablement phase. So I feel like startups like ourselves, KPay and others, we're all trying to help bridge that gap to really allow for and help SMEs really use these tools better and in a less fragmented manner. So, for example, SMEs not only have these tools now, but they're asking more questions around how can these tools help me save time? How can they help me save money? How can I get more cash flow from these things? So these are all things that we're solving for. And so I think we're sort of evolving in terms of this conversation around like, are we as a nation really being digitally enabled at this moment?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because it's really about rethinking how payments fit into every part of the customer journey.
Absolutely. And I think ultimately, payments 10, 15 years ago was just having it was sufficient. But nowadays it's about, is it a seamless experience? Like, for example, on our side, like you have to have all the payment methods available. So for us, like all 20%, 20 plus payment methods are in our Terminal Pro net right now. So all of these sort of small nuances, which in the past were nice to haves, they're almost must haves now in the market.
Okay. Christopher, KPay is now setting up its regional headquarters in Singapore. So my question is, why here and not, say, Hong Kong or Japan, where you also operate?
Yeah, look, we think there's a lot of great factors that's happening in Singapore. I can share maybe 2 or 3 data points. So one is, of course, how critical the SME pool base is for the Singapore's economy. I mean, some of these statistics you might already know. So say, for example, SME contributes to about 47% of GDP and close to 70% of workforce. So the addressable market for us is already quite big. I think there's 2 further factors that we looked into. One is the top-down support. So I think at the government level, as you know, there's a lot of key initiatives like Smart Nation 2.0 or SMEs going digital, where we feel like there is this like big picture 5, 10, 15, or even 50-year vision for the government to actually move in this right direction. So I think that's very helpful for startups. And from a bottom-up perspective, I think we're also seeing a lot of great talent. We're seeing a talent pool that is very international and very interconnected with the rest of Southeast Asia. And so all of these elements, I feel like, give us a very strong reason to build more resources into Singapore.
Wonderful. I love that Singapore is not just a market in itself, but also a launch pad into the region. Now,
Absolutely.
let's talk about innovation now. PayTech is evolving beyond just transactions. What does the next chapter look like for you? And how does KPay fit in?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of different new angles people are looking at from a PayTech perspective, right? For example, things like how embedded financing truly becomes, where truly payments becomes a frictionless experience. I think that's very topical. I think there's topics like how does payments become further integrated with other operational tools like SaaS and CRMs and others. I think that's very topical in itself. Of course, there's the conversation around AI in terms of like the agentic side of things. I think that's very topical for payments. But I think, and of course, lastly, like I think the big topic that very topical on everyone's mind is Web3 and stablecoins. So I think there's a lot of like structural things that are happening from a PayTech perspective. At least for us, I think the more short-term pain points that we're ultimately continuing to solve for is, again, how can we make sure the full payment experience from money coming in to money going out for a merchant is seamless? So I think that in itself, there's still a lot of pain points that we need to solve for. And I think secondly, our whole vision was to use payments as a entry product to help a merchant, but also wrap that around with other third-party value-added services as well. And so we still see that as quite fragmented in the market. And so I think even those 2 alone, like I feel like it's more than enough work for us to kind of solve for the different pain points that we're seeing for the Singapore market as well as the rest of the region.
Just out of curiosity, I understand that you have this KPay business account. How does that help SMEs expand into the region?
Yeah, so the business account, basically, if you think about kind of the merchant journey from, a merchant doing business, they collect funds, right? And then in most cases right now, without a business account, the funds are actually deposited into a third-party bank account right now. So it could be your typical banks or, other service providers. For us, if you have a business account experience, basically from the money coming in to the settling of the funds and then further on money going out of the ecosystem, it's a full one-stop seamless experience. So instead of having 2 or potentially even 3 service providers just providing the pay in kind of money sitting in the account and then pay out, instead of having 3 experiences, you can have one seamless experience with one service provider. So I think that's why we think the business account side is actually quite important as well as we think about providing an ultimate end-to-end seamless experience.
Okay. And you mentioned SaaS integration. In Hong Kong, 40% of merchants adopted multiple KPay products. I think this suggests
Correct.
SMEs are ready for bundled solutions. So how important are partnerships in making this happen?
Oh, absolutely. Because, our whole ethos is actually opening up our ecosystem to work with partners. So a lot of the third-party tools that, as mentioned, are not in-house built. They're actually working with third-party partners that are very good at what they do on the, for example, POS side, CRM side, loyalty side, accounting side, etc. And so it's really important for us to really make sure that as we grow, they grow too. And so what we've seen is actually integration really matters. Payments only in isolation is, at least in today's world, is not enough for merchants. And so that's being shown in the numbers that you just quoted in terms of 40% plus adopting to more than just payments as of now. I think secondly, what's really important is just partners that see us as a win-win situation. I think everybody, a lot of players in the market are thinking about how to create their own ecosystem. But for us, it's about creating a shared ecosystem.
Okay. It's really about ecosystems rather than standalones, right? I mean, SMEs
Absolutely.
want less complexity, not more. No one want to deal with 5 or 6 vendors when they can bring everything together. Finally, let's talk about impact. KPay has set a target to double its market share in Singapore by 2026, with a longer-term ambition to serve 20% of Singapore's SMEs. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
So if you achieve those milestones, what would it mean for the broader economy?
Yeah, we will have a stronger voice in helping merchants continue to journey along to do and create better productivity for their business. I think productivity is quite a topical conversation from what we've seen in Singapore. So I think productivity hopefully increases over time. We think financial inclusion as well. And ultimately with technological changes, we feel like it creates jobs as well, new types of jobs that will be created that are moving along with the times. And so I think for us to be able to really touch on and serve up to 20% of Singapore SMEs, this allows us as a platform to really serve these merchants in the best possible way. So I think the goal is ultimately that.
Well, powerful vision, I think, showing how PayTech can go far beyond transactions to drive lasting economic transformation. Thank you so much for your time today, Christopher.
Thank you so much for having me.
Here is Christopher Yu, president of KPay, which is a fast-growing PayTech company now establishing its regional headquarters in Singapore. You've been listening to Industry Insight on Money FM 89.3.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.